So we've got Olivia from GB News.
Good morning. According to your figures, this is going to cost about between 1.5 billion and 2 billion over a parliament. Obviously, that's very expensive. How is it going to be paid for? You mentioned scrapping Mickey Mouse degrees. What counts as a Mickey Mouse degree? Can you explain in a bit more detail?
Yeah, we've got we've costed it out in the paper before you, but generally speaking, there are big savings to be made from the huge wastage in the education budget right now. We estimate that we can save about £2 billion from stopping foreign students from accessing student loans, which are taxpayer funded. We can save, again, between £2 to £5 billion from stopping government funding for Mickey Mouse degrees. Just think of this. The government lays out £21 to £22 billion a year in student loans. I'm afraid a lot of that will never be paid back because of graduate unemployment, and a lot of it is written off. And that is a betrayal of the British taxpayer. We need to be much more rigorous with how we're spending that money initially to fund higher education. And so there are those two sources of funding. There's also a huge amount of unspent levy funding. The apprenticeship levy at the moment is not working, if I'm honest. Companies pay into the government apprenticeship pot, but because of the bureaucracy and the hurdles involved in reclaiming that money, a lot of it remains unspent, estimated about £3 billion between for about 5 years. I'd estimate that at £500 million a year. So that money can be diverted to actual proper funding of apprenticeships. But overall, that's how we would pay for this tax wage credit. You want to take that?
Brilliant. BBC, Damien Grammaticus.
Over here, sorry, at the side. One question on the apprenticeships. I mean, part of the way you said you wanted to fund it when you were speaking there, and just now, was through student loans. Student loans are accounted for as borrowing. They don't come out of day-to-day spending. So can you just confirm then, part of this is going to be funded by borrowing? And can I ask you, Mr. Tice, a couple of questions? Tim Montgomerie's suspension, were you involved in that, and do you support that? And also, there's a Reform UK candidate, Julian Malin's KC, who is a candidate for PCC in Wiltshire and in Salisbury at the general election. He's been saying that Russia is supplying drones to Ukraine, is making Russia feel threatened, that we shouldn't be doing that. We should be recognising and having diplomatic relations with Russia. And he criticised the leadership. He said in the Commons there's no voices speaking against this. So that sounds like a direct criticism of the party. Should he be suspended?
Thank you, Damien. So I think on the first point that you raised was with regard to the funding of this, cash is cash. Whether you think that it's cash as a positive in a balance sheet or a bank account, or whether you're borrowing it, it's money, it's cash. And as Suella quite rightly said, the amount of money going into student loans, it's all government money, okay? And this government is borrowing vast sums, and the point made was that the value being extracted or being generated by so many student loans is not what it should be. And there is an additional saving, which is that those who go to do apprenticeships at 16 to 18, of course, working in businesses, small businesses like Kevin's, are, of course, those youngsters. Therefore, there is a saving in terms of the money that they're not taking from sixth form colleges, for example. So there is an additional saving there, and in a sense, we hope that this becomes ever more successful. We hope that our numbers, our growth numbers in here, turn out to be an underestimate. And if so, as Suella said, you're talking about a skills revolution from the age of 16. And just talking earlier, in Germany, for example, this has been a bedrock of small family businesses, the manufacturing sector, and that's why they've been so successful. Look, with regard to other matters, Tim and the things, we're a fast-growing political party. There'll be a range of views, and sometimes we'll agree, and sometimes we'll have a debate and discussion. That's what you do in business, that's what you do in a boardroom, that's what you do when you're brainstorming. But what we've always said is that actually, when you are when you're having your discussions about those things, in the nicest possible way, as you would in a boardroom or in a brainstorming session in a company, you keep it behind closed doors. And then you go out and sell a great message. That's what we're doing. With regard to the other matters, frankly, it's much more important to talk about young people, apprenticeships, the future of this great nation, than anybody else.
So you're not saying that Julian Mayland's...
I'm in the nicest possible way. I'm focusing on youngsters, I'm focusing on apprenticeships. That's the critical thing for what we're here today. And also, small, growing businesses. That's what we should be focusing on, Damien.
But you're not going to criticise him for saying...
Damien, in the nicest possible way, we're focusing on apprenticeships, we're focusing on small businesses, we're focusing on young people. That's the important thing. Everything else is for a different moment.
And sorry, on the one hand, it sounds like you are saying it would be borrowing.
Look, Damien, the government's borrowing £3 trillion.
Got to get it down.
It's all debt, but it's all money, right? And we're borrowing it from bond investors who are pretty grumpy at the moment, who are applying a moron premium to UK government debt, right? The 30-year cost of government borrowing is just about to hit 6%. Right? We're the worst in the developed world. And what's interesting is that you folk in the media who talked about Liz Truss trashing the economy, you haven't talked about Keir Starmer and Andy Burnham losing the confidence of the markets and crashing the economy because the 30-year government debt yield is way higher than it was back then. All right? If you want another economics lesson, I'll talk to you later.
Thank you. Bethany Dawson.
Hello. As per your plans, you will scrap loans for foreign students. Does that include EU students? And are you willing to go into a very expensive fight with the EU over this? If so, as well as your plans to change the benefit system? Yesterday, Work and Pension Secretary Pat McFadden told me that your battle with the EU isn't thought through. Do you know how much this fight would cost?
So the simple answer is yes. British students need to be put first. And so we'll be again announcing further policies in soon about student financing. But we need to fix the system at the moment. As I said, where the British taxpayer, it's not the government, the British taxpayer is laying out £22 billion in student loans, whether it's borrowed or otherwise, it's cash, and it's money which is not being well spent. And so we need to ensure that the best students go to the right universities and do valuable courses. And if they are, then the government backs them. But there's many students who are not, frankly, doing that. And whether it's non-British students or whether it's students going on Mickey Mouse courses, that comes to an end under a reform government.
There is actually a real opportunity as we move forward with apprenticeships, with trades for universities to get stuck in to help here. Because as the world of learning and with AI and everything's changing, then universities need to adapt and change and adjust with it. And it's all up for grabs. And look, we're in a low-growth, no-growth economy. Most of the major EU countries are in a low-growth, no-growth, recessionary-style environment. We've all got challenges. Keep talking. But, you know, there's no such thing as a sort of static trade deal. And we've got to have the courage to recognise that and work out what's best for the UK.
Changing the conditions of the Brexit agreement, though, in terms of benefits and student loans, would likely be a costly argument with the EU. Do you know how much it would cost?
Let's talk about it as a broad, overarching debate. You know, you're talking about... The thing is, when you strike an agreement, it's not like forever. The world's changing. You know, when we struck that agreement, AI didn't exist, right? Here we are, 7 years later, and the world's changing fast. And whether it's on fishing deals, whether it's on student deals, or all sorts of other things, of course, we'll talk to our friends in the EU and say, where are we today? Where do we need to go? How are we going to stop the boats? And find some solutions. We'll agree on lots, and we may not agree on others.
You haven't calculated how much this...
Well, what I would say is that
I'm an optimist, and I'm working on the basis that you talk about a cost, I talk about an opportunity.
And ultimately, the agreement with the EU is not the best one that we could get. If you look at Northern Ireland, it's not working. And so there does need to be a review of our situation, our arrangement with the EU.
And they've got massive problems as well. It's not working for them.
Tom, at The Sun.
Thank you very much. Should businesses which replace entry-level workers with AI also have to pay towards retraining young people for apprenticeships? And the second question, if I may, if you had a 16-year-old getting their GCSE results and looking forward to university in 2 years' time, can you name one very specific Mickey Mouse degree that you would say not to study?
Okay, well, listen, so AI is coming, as Richard said, and we need to be very cognizant of how that's going to change the labour market, how we even educate and prepare our young people for the workforce of the future. And anyone who thinks it's not going to be a factor has their head buried in the sand. This is why I believe so passionately in a skills revolution. We need young people who are going to be builders, scaffolders, painters and decorators, quantity surveyors, people whose jobs will not be hit by AI. And frankly, Kevin and the young people you've met here, you are AI proof, because AI is not going to be able to paint a room. And so I think that employers are feeling the impact of AI. There are jobs which are being replaced by AI. And so we're all feeling it, and it's coming faster and faster. And that's why my advice to young people is be very aware of the changing labour market and prepare yourself accordingly. In terms of Mickey Mouse courses, listen, this has been well chronicled for many years, whether it's gender studies, whether it's golf course studies, I think I've seen. There's not a necessity, there's not a value in many of these degrees. Now, I know that might be uncomfortable for those people who have those qualifications, but the reality is you've got to ask yourself, what are your graduate outcomes looking like? Have you really spent 3 years of your life in the best possible way, and was it worth £50,000 worth of debt? Young people are coming out of university unable to get onto the housing ladder, unable and unwilling to get married, unable to start a family. Why? Because they're starting off with their hands tied behind their backs, because they've been sold a lie that university was the pathway to success. For hundreds of thousands of young people, it is not. Far better to those young people getting their results today at 16. Think about how you can avoid that trap. Start earning, start learning in a sector where you've got opportunities to progress. Maybe start out on your own. There is huge potential for you. You've got to be smart about your choices. Christian at the Daily Mail.
Hiya. Constant infighting, bickering, briefings against each other, an intensely unpopular individual dominating headlines, an institution at war with itself. What do you make of Harry and Meghan returning to Britain?
I thought you were talking about the Conservative Party there.
I thought you were talking about the Labour Party.
Harry and Meghan, listen, I think they're no longer working members of the royal family. What they do is their business.
Yeah, we're focusing on young people and apprenticeships in the nicest possible way. But thank you, Christian. Do you have a question about the specifics? I mean, although of course their own children, as they go through school, when they do their GCSEs, they can benefit from if they actually decide that university is not for them. And the world of Hollywood and media, for example, they might decide that their best opportunities is through an apprenticeship through this brilliant scheme.
Would you encourage young Rods to take up apprenticeship opportunities?
I think absolutely, because as we've talked about, and as you see, the skills that you learn can then, as you grow, you succeed, you become an entrepreneur, a risk taker. You never forget what you learnt in those first couple of years. Here we are, whatever it is, 43 years later. I never forget digging that first trench with a guy, working the JCB digger, and it's absolutely etched in my heart. So those are the great skills that we learn.
Harry, the Press Association. Great.
Good morning, Harry Taylor from the Press Association. 2 questions. First of all, Mrs. Braverman, you talked about the university scam, mediocre institutions, Mickey Mouse courses. If you clamp down on these, universities will close and jobs will go. I think you talked about the reality earlier. I think that's probably the reality of it. How many under a reform government would you be willing to see go?
So I don't think it necessarily needs to mean closures. I think it means reorienting. And I think we're coming to the end of the era of the kind of cash cow of higher education. Universities have grown fat on foreign students. The floodgates were opened by the last Conservative government, something when I went into the Home Office I was determined to reverse. We all know how that ended. I was blocked by Rishi Sunak and the last Conservative government, although I did manage to eke out the first set of changes to foreign students in May 2023. Those were the first ever changes, and from then you can see a decline. But ultimately, foreign students have been a cash cow for a lot of universities. And it's been more, universities have been selling immigration, not education, for many, many years. That needs to come to an end. What I would say to universities is you need to reorient yourselves, repurpose yourselves into construction colleges, into manufacturing colleges. I want elite institutions which raise the esteem of the trades. So there's no need to close. There is a need, however, to meet the needs of our labour market and the skills revolution. So get with our agenda, come and work with us, and you can be part of this revolution, not a casualty of it.
And actually, it is so important that they readjust, that they adapt to the changing world. When I was with a group of AI entrepreneurs just recently, one of them said that his son was just leaving a very well-known university, trained as a lawyer. He had 7 other friends also just graduating as lawyers. Not a single one of the 7 had an internship or a job offer from any legal firm, not a single one. So universities will have no choice but to adjust and adapt and work it out. And in the nicest possible way, we're also negotiating on behalf of the taxpayer, and we've got to make sure that we get value for money for every pound, whether you think it's cash or whether you think it's debt. And that's our job, and that's the balance. And I think because AI has come so quickly that it's a challenge for everybody. It's a challenge for businesses, it's a challenge for universities, it's a challenge for government, but it's also, of course, a great opportunity. Get it right.
Yeah. And just secondly, in the last few weeks, your Home Affairs spokesperson has called people who disagree with him traitors. Reform has suspended Tim Montgomerie, as has been mentioned, and Nigel Farage didn't turn up to the count in Clacton, partially, we suspect, because he didn't want to be photographed alongside Count Binface and 35 other candidates of spurious sort of background. But is there a chance now that Reform is coming across as rather thin-skinned with all of this in the last few weeks?
Oh, far from it. I think, we get more scrutiny than everybody else. But isn't it interesting? Nigel's success in Clacton, getting 1,000 more votes than he secured, despite a much, much lower turnout. That was an incredible result through hard work, through a brilliant campaign. And what I haven't spotted you report is that we're going back up in the polls. And we're back ahead of Labour. We're not afraid of competition. In a sense, democracy demands competition. And voters have got more choice. That's a good thing. None of us have ever claimed we're perfect. In all life, even in the media. Do you know what? We do lots of things well in businesses. We get lots right, we make mistakes. That's the nature of life. But we push on, we're being successful, and we're getting a fantastic response. And what I'm so excited about is it's in the SME sector, whether it's the 1 or 2 man band or a growing business. That's the bedrock of getting us back to the sort of growth that we used to enjoy in the 80s and 90s, 3% year in, year out. And we've got a major crisis at the moment. We've got no growth and we've got a debt crisis.
Rowena, Guardian. No. And Alexander, The Mirror.
Hi, Suella, as Home Secretary, you proposed new laws to restrict the use of tents by homeless people, called it a lifestyle choice, and you would have dished out penalties for those authorities believed had rejected offers of help. Do you stand by that, and do you support the PM's pledge to end rough sleeping?
Well, I didn't say that homelessness was a lifestyle choice. I said that we are a compassionate nation and we want to support people who are vulnerable. And homelessness is a really complex issue. People often have mental health problems, addiction problems, family breakdown issues, worklessness issues. And so there's a holistic approach that needs to be taken to combating homelessness. And there is a subset of people who are on our streets who are choosing to be there. And we've just seen a report yesterday that there's a very high number of, I think a record number of foreign nationals who are living as homeless, are homeless on our streets. They're coming here, some of them illegally, who don't have the right to be here, and they are choosing to live on the streets, and that often is linked to criminality. And so I think we need to be honest about the nature and the scale of the problem. It is nuanced. There are genuinely homeless people who are there through no fault of their own, and they need compassion and support. We need more house building. We need more affordable housing for them. And there are people who are frankly breaking the law and causing a blight on our communities, involving, criminal activity, aggressive begging, harassment on the streets, ruining parts of our community. And there needs to be a tough approach taken towards those.
And with regard to the Prime Minister, look, we'd all like to end homelessness, of course. So the Prime Minister's ambition is a good one. And I hope that he learns the lessons of his failures over the last 4 years in Manchester, where homelessness numbers have actually risen, not reduced. But that's fine. He can learn from those and do better, Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.